Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. And to those who have testified today, I just want to say thank you, and specifically to Rod Slater. I can say I knew you before you had gray hair in your head, and I hope it wasn't the federal government that put it there, but it probably was. Welcome back. It's good to see you.
Thanks, Senator.
I would like to ask this question because it's one of the things that has really bothered me, and that has to do with leaving for a substantial period of time the United States Supreme Court in a tied position, a 4-4 position, when we know that the court is divided, and what impact that's going to have. And I think there are many of us that estimate that the time is likely to be 1.5 years. By the time you get through the vetting process and all of this, that you can process another nominee. So I wanted to ask the question as to what happens when the court accepts, what happens when the court is tied and the lower courts are split and is unable to resolve a case. We've seen that already in 4 tie votes, a public sector labor case from my home state, a death penalty case, a state sovereignty case, and a gender discrimination case. And this week, the court essentially deferred on an important issue involving whether religiously affiliated nonprofits can withhold contraceptive coverage from their employees. That's an issue that's vitally important to women nationwide. So I would like to have your views on what happens when you have a 4-4 split. Could we begin with you, Professor Driver?
Sure. So the technical answer is that when the court is 4-4, that it's affirmed by an equally divided court without setting any precedential value. Exactly as the senator suggests, the result is that a conflict that exists in the federal court remains a conflict. And it's an issue that the court has identified as needing a uniform federal law. That's a major reason that the Supreme Court exists. And that function cannot happen when the justices are equally divided.
Could you explain what does happen when the appellate court has made a decision and then the court is tied?
Yeah, so the result is a lack of uniformity where the courts of appeals have reached differing answers, and it creates oftentimes uncertainty into the law, and that's difficult for all sorts of citizens. I should also say that given the potentially lengthy timeline of an absence, that it could shape the cases that the court ends up hearing. And so the cases that are currently not being decided, in effect, were already in the pipeline before Justice Scalia's death. But during the cert stage, when the court is contemplating whether to agree to resolve a question, one could quite easily imagine a scenario whereby they would say, there's a chance that we could be deadlocked, and in order to avoid that deadlock, there's still a lack of uniformity with respect to the federal law. And the justices have gone to great lengths in order to avoid reaching a deadlock, but sometimes that will introduce more uncertainty into the law for the reasons that you identified earlier, where one attempts to just send something back down without deciding, as we saw in the important reproductive rights decision. The court views itself as articulating generally applicable principles, not merely resolving a dispute between a few parties. And so it seems like a very undesirable consequence.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.